I'm Trevor Flanery with the Rockingham Community College Trails Program, which is a continuing education program that was started by a grant from Duke Energy in the wake of the Eden coal ash spills. And there was a large stakeholder gathering to kind of assess throughout the basin what they wanted to do in the wake of that. And they came up with a project where they would develop a community college that would work on outdoor recreation and environmental literacy around these topics. So we work to develop a lot of outdoor recreation and environmental programs, some of them quite short. The link's above. So with that, we'll just move on to the topic for today. As some of you mentioned, there was recent kind of presentation on sustainable trails. And what that usually means in the industry is trying to keep water off the trail to reduce the amount of maintenance, to reduce the amount of erosion. And so there are very specific technical guidelines in how you design a trail, how it's built, how it's maintained, slopes, and these kinds of things. And so with our topic today, we were thinking about what actually is sustainable, how do you leave no trace when you've got these outdoor recreation amenities, which are going to have an environmental impact. Just having a lot of people marching through the woods is going to affect at least that small area of the woods. So the opportunity there, though, is that you've got this large-scale trail in the Mountain to Sea Trail that creates networks and connections throughout the entire state and natural areas in various different biomes and habitats. And it's not just a space that humans can move through safely in a natural air setting. It's also something that other wildlife can move through. And if you're going to have an environmental impact of having these feet pounding along this trail or have this water running along this trail, you can also have an opportunity to think, intelligently and plan on how you can restore those habitats so that you're actually making the situation better for wildlife and better for those different environments that the trail moves through. So we're getting a lot of climate change impacts. So species are needing to move as climatic conditions kind of shift. They need to find a spot that is more appropriate for them in real time. And we've got the Appalachian Trail, which allows species to move north and south, and the Mountain Sea Trail could potentially allow that highway east to west. So I want to leave plenty of time for our presenters to get their 2 cents in on the subject. But as you have questions, just please post them to the chat. And with that, I'll hand things over to Ben.
Thanks, Trevor. So for those of you who I don't think I have met yet, my name is Ben Jones, and I am a staff member for Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail as the Coastal Crescent project coordinator, project manager, excuse me. And I have an undergraduate degree in environmental studies and graduate degrees in horticultural science and most recently landscape architecture. And that's actually when I got connected to the trails, kind of working to use my school projects as a way to help the MST, getting connected with Kate Dixon. And I became a member of the staff in January of 2019. And really what I'm doing is just putting my skills to use to plan, design, and advocate for new sections of trail, not entirely, but mostly in Eastern North Carolina. And so what I'm gonna do is show some examples of our work that lend themselves to this concept of trails as habitat. And I just need permission to share the screen.
Should I introduce myself as well, or do you want to just?
We had an issue with this before in that I wasn't, and it looks like you are not a co-host. So I'm gonna jump out and see if we can get that fixed, and I'll be right back.
Okay, and it is a recorded presentation, so if need be, I can pass it over to someone else.
But if I jump out, we won't be recording, so I won't jump out.
Okay, so that's an interesting wrinkle.
So I'm texting Betsy now.
In that case, should I send my presentation to you as well?
I suspect by the time you're up that they will make you a co-host and you will be able to do it.
Okay.
Well, while we're waiting for that, if I could just jump in. Fred Dietrich here in the Eno River section. And if you see my image there, you can see in the background something we've been doing as part of our way of sort of hardening and making the trails more sustainable, which is we've in several cases replaced wood bridges, which are made out of treated lumber and so forth, and have a short lifespan and have all sorts of issues. With, in this case, a stone arch bridge, which we think will have a very long lifespan and is quite durable. And I think Bill Boyarsky is on this group, and he can attest that these are easy to build, and those stones aren't heavy at all. So,
not at all.
I just thought I'd throw that out while we have a little break here.
Okay. Brooke, if you wanted to go ahead and introduce yourself then.
Sure. My name is Brooke Messa. I'm a conservation biologist with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. I've been with the commission for about 9 years. I got my master's at Duke in environmental management and my undergrad at UC Berkeley. In my job, I work on conservation planning and partnerships, as well as local government conservation policy with the Green Growth Toolbox program. I also do research and surveys on several non-game taxa groups, birds, herps, and bats. And I work on land acquisition projects as well. So I have a pretty broad range of duties with my position at the Wildlife Commission. My presentation today is just kind of give you an overview of some of the things that we do on the lands that we own and manage that you'll probably have all been on while walking the Mountains to Sea Trail. So hopefully it's interesting and informative.
So I just got word, you all, Brooke and Ben, you'll need to leave the chat room and go out to the main room, or the breakout room, go to the main room to become hosts, and then come back in. So maybe Ben can do that, and Brooke, you can continue introducing yourself, and then when he's back, he can start and you can leave. Does that make sense?
Sure, that's all I have for introduction.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I didn't know what else. I mean, I'm sure I could talk about myself for more. If we need be, but I'd rather not.
You could talk about building that stone bridge if it's simple.
I'd rather not get too sidelined. Let's see if we can do this.
All right, I'm back and I'm in business.
All right.
Okay. So thanks for your patience, everybody. Let me make sure I've got my audio shared, and let's give it a shot. My plan today is to quickly showcase 3 examples of our current work that illustrate how we are creating powerful partnerships to support our goal of using the Mountains to Sea Trail to improve the landscapes it traverses. The first example is our work at the Pondberry Bay Preserve near Roseboro in Sampson County, where there are legitimate concerns about public access being provided by the MST. The 2,100-acre preserve is managed by the North Carolina Plant Conservation Program. This program is tasked with the listing of North Carolina's endangered and threatened plant species and the development of conservation programs designed to permanently protect them. Within this large tract, there are remnant areas of high-quality longleaf pine savanna, Atlantic white cedar streamheads, and upland Carolina Bay wetlands. Together, they contain a number of threatened species and 1 federally endangered species for which the preserve was created. That species is Lindera melicifolia, or the Pondberry Bay, a rare deciduous shrub that thrives in poorly drained areas, specifically the Carolina Bay wetlands at this location. There are only 3 known populations in North Carolina, and the largest by far is in this preserve. The map here shows the current MST road route through Roseboro as a dashed black line, and our original proposed route through the Pondberry Bay Preserve in red. The darker areas of color imagery show all publicly owned land, including the preserve, and the purple areas represent private parcels targeted for acquisition or easement. Regardless of concerns about creating a trail, the preserve is currently dealing with a number of challenging management issues that are stretching the program's limited time and resources. The site has numerous large areas in need of ecological restoration, and a major issue with illegal access by hunters, four-wheelers, and people dumping trash that they have been unable to effectively stop. So after 3 years of dialogue and trust building, we have come to an understanding that if managed appropriately, the trail could be a net positive for this preserve. It would bring in more eyes and oversight to keep illegal activities in check. It would provide a pool of volunteers and resources to help with restoration projects, and it would raise public awareness and support for the plant conservation program's mission. So with their guidance, we have scouted and approved a preliminary trail route that is smaller than the MST's original proposal shown earlier, but will allow us to prove our value and continue building trust that partnering with the Mountains to Sea Trail will support the goals of the Pondberry Bay Preserve. The second example is our ongoing work in Bladen County in what we are calling the Three Lakes region, named for the area's distinctive Carolina Bay lakes that the trail connects to. The area has numerous state park facilities, but the largest landholder by far is the North Carolina Forest Service. Bladen Lake State Forest manages 33,000 acres, including the 900-acre Turnbull Creek Educational State Forest pictured here. Much of this land is undisturbed. However, there are many areas where the impacts of intensive forestry practices over the past 60 years have severely damaged natural communities. Fortunately, in more recent years, Bladen Lake State Forest has been working to create more sustainable practices and understands that partnering with the Mountains to Sea Trail can create new opportunities and help educate more people on how our state's incredible history was built on the longleaf pine forests of this region. This map shows the current MST road route as a dashed black line, our current trail as yellow lines, and our proposed route through the area as red lines. The darker areas of color imagery show all publicly owned land, including Bladen Lake State Forest. The green tract is Turnbull Creek Educational State Forest, the yellow areas show state park properties, and the purple areas represent private parcels targeted for acquisition or easement. One area where we are planning to establish the MST and that has historically been intensively managed and thus negatively impacted is the area along the lower Turnbull Creek. Looking more closely here, you can see the impact of logging on the forest and how little undisturbed area remains. However, once we build our planned bridge over Turnbull Creek at Camp Chamblee, we can open up a new 6-mile section immediately along existing trail and forest roads. Then, with the trail established, we believe we can work over time, partnering with the Forest Service, to create a conservation corridor around the trail that can buffer Turnbull Creek and other sensitive areas from forestry activities. There are so many beautiful places in this state forest that are rarely, if ever, seen, and these landscapes can serve so many purposes beyond extraction of resources. I'm really excited to see a bridge like our conceptual one here cross Turnbull Creek and open up this area for the public to enjoy. Once people learn to love it, it should be even easier to manage sustainably, restore, and preserve. The third and final example is our recently started work at Belews Lake, a man-made lake that flows into the nearby Dan River and is covered by parts of 4 counties: Forsyth, Stokes, Rockingham, and Guilford. Belews Lake is a large lake built in the 70s by Duke Energy to support their coal-fired Belews Creek power station. In order to build the lake, Duke purchased massive amounts of property, much of which would be flooded. However, to this day, Duke owns a large amount of land beyond the shores of the lake, some of which has preservation potential and the ability to support an incredible network of trails anchored by the MST. We are also partnering with the Piedmont Land Conservancy so that we can support their regional conservation goals and lean on their expertise regarding local ecology. As you can see in this map, the Mountains to Sea Trail route between Hanging Rock State Park and Lake Brant north of Greensboro is unfinished, and Belews Lake represents the greatest ecological asset and opportunity to establish a trail in the area. Here's a view of Hanging Rock from the southeast corner of Belews Lake. You can also see here how undeveloped the shoreline of Belews Lake still is. As Duke Energy is transforming in the face of climate change and the Blues Creek Power Station transitions to natural gas, we are concerned that this may change. Duke has sold and leased some of their lakefront land for development before, and we are hoping we can convince them to take another path. Their property is like a massive time capsule, a lot of which has been completely untouched for almost 50 years. So our goal is to open up the time capsule, see what's inside, and make a plan for conservation and trail building that best suits it. You can see in this map Duke's property in dark gray, the power station in dark red, the publicly owned and managed land in yellow, and North Carolina Natural Heritage Program natural areas in green. The current MST route is shown as a black dotted line on roads and as a red line through the Cascades Preserve. In this frame, there are 8 natural heritage areas, of which Duke has land within 3, directly adjacent to 2, and very near the other 3. Additionally, these natural heritage inventories were conducted in the 1990s and likely need to be updated. So our initial goal has been to both identify a feasible trail route through the property, as well as to identify priority areas to survey for conservation potential. We've started by analyzing elevation and slope through digital elevation models like the one shown here. This has helped us understand where a trail can be routed to minimize impact on wetlands or steep slopes, as well as where to look for rare plant communities, for example, rock outcroppings. From here, based on what can be seen in aerial imagery and the elevation model, we have identified exploratory routes that could create both a through trail for the MST and a loop around the lake that connects with local communities Stokesdale, Pine Hall, and Walnut Cove. We've also used the aerial imagery to conduct an extensive survey that identifies all of the remaining natural hardwood forest cover. And you can see here in green the nearly finished version, and how this survey work has identified habitat corridors and areas for further study that may be good candidates for conservation, regardless of proximity to the trail. And when we clip this survey to the Duke Energy property boundary, it gives us a really good idea of what areas to prioritize as we continue investigating the Duke property now and into the future. With all that in mind, we have identified what could be 5 continuous sections of natural surface trail totaling 40 miles, completely within Duke Energy property or public property or existing conservation properties. And our next step in the process will be conducting baseline environmental surveys of the corridors around these proposed routes, tree size, tree species, unique features, for example, to identify important natural resources for further investigation and to evaluate the potential for trail. I'm so excited to see what can come of our partnership here and how we can grow as a coalition to continue protecting and providing access to our natural resources for years to come. And I sincerely believe that we are stronger and more successful when we work together, and the Mountains to Sea Trail can serve as a very effective conduit for that collaboration. Thank you. All right, Brooke.
Sure. I also pre-recorded my presentation because I have a toddler and I wasn't sure if she would be awake or not. Luckily, she's napping right now. So let me see if I can find it. Oops. How do I go back? Escape. Sorry, let me try that again.
The audio seems really soft, Brooke. Is there a way you can increase it?
Let's see.
If you go to, did you share audio through the screen share option menu? So there should be 3 dots at the top right of the screen share, and then a drop down should give you share audio.
Okay, so let's see if that works better. Should I start from the beginning again, or?
Yes, please.
Okay. That's why I'm on the trail. So I wanted to take this opportunity to Oops. Okay, hopefully this works. Sorry about this.
No problem.
No, all right.
So our mission as an agency.
I don't know why it's.
You have to stay unmuted while it presents, if that's what you're.
No, it keeps. I don't know how to make it start. That's the problem. Okay. Because when I push, maybe I push enter. No.
So our mission as an agency is to protect wildlife and wildlife.
Sorry.
It's all right if you just want to launch it from where you got to, as long as we're able to get through the bulk of it.
Yeah, it's short. I aim for 6 minutes. So, all right, we'll just start here.
Our mission as an agency is to protect wildlife and wildlife habitat and to provide for wildlife-related recreation access to the public. Mostly, we're known to provide for hunting and fishing opportunity, but also we support and provide for other outdoor recreation uses like hiking. So the Mountains to Sea Trail goes through many of the lands that we own or manage to some degree. You can see that Mountains to Sea Trail going through these lands in green. The Forest Service lands here in the West, we don't play much role in management, but they are enrolled in the Game Lands program, so hunting is allowed on them. Lands in light green we own outright. We have over 530 acres allocated to us. And some of these dark green lands are owned by other entities besides the Wildlife Commission or by the state of North Carolina. We do like 100% of the management of the land. So Falls Lake, for example, where the Mountains to Sea Trail goes through in the triangle, we do most of the land management on that piece of property, although State Parks also does some of it. So on game lands, we do active management to protect and restore ecosystem integrity with the ultimate goal of conserving and restoring biodiversity. This will include practices like prescribed fire, which is, right now we're in fire season. So you may be walking on the trail and you may smell smoke, you may see fire on the landscape. And you may also be walking through a blackened burnt forest, and that's all to mimic a natural fire regime, like a 3 to 5 year rotation for pines, a longer rotation for hardwoods. But that's certainly a practice we do on the lands we manage as much as possible where appropriate. We also do things like thinning and clear cutting in some cases for different reasons. We also do management for providing hunting opportunities, so like waterfowl impoundments and dove fields. Those are really important management activities on our lands. While you're walking through our lands, you'll see things that you may not always understand, and we do get some questions from the public, and feel free to ask us anytime why we're doing what we're doing. I know that the driving force behind our management activity is for biodiversity conservation, and we do have management plans for our lands that are available to the public through our website. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask us or review our plans, and you can see what's driving the practices that you are experiencing while on the trail. So again, like I said, hunting is a really important use of our game lands. The public can't hunt on state parks, so the game lands are really the only public access for people to do hunting. That doesn't mean that game lands are only for hunting, not at all. They're for anybody to use in the public. The Mountains to Sea Trail obviously goes through our game lands. So do many other trails and pedestrian-only access roads. So they're great places to go for walks or runs. But hunting is, something to understand about hunting is that it is only seasonal. So there's a very short window of time where hunting is allowed on game lands for different types of species. And even within the hunting season, there's only certain days of the week that hunting is allowed. So depending on where you are and what day you're at, there may be hunting going on and there may not be hunting. When there is hunting going on, it's really important to wear blaze orange on the trail. Also to be cognizant that hunters really do have a very limited amount of time where they're able to go out on a hunt, whereas hikers can go out and hike out any day of the week, of the year. It's always open for hiking. So just something to think about in terms of trying to reduce disturbance to hunting opportunity. But certainly you're all welcome at all times to be on the game lands. A complete list of regulations as it pertains to hunting is available on our, we have an annual regs digest that is available to the public. So of course, another really important purpose of our game lands is to provide for wildlife habitat, especially for imperiled species, like ones we have identified through our wildlife action plan. Those are species of greatest conservation need. We have a lot of biologists on staff, but we have many, many more acres than we do biologists. So we do not have complete inventories of our game lands. So when you're out there working or walking the trail, apps like iNaturalist for observations that you see could be very useful to us. We usually go to the Natural Heritage Program for our data, but more and more we're starting to look at citizen science as a good source of information for helping understand what's going on our lands and potentially impacting or influencing the management that we're doing on our lands to support those species, especially imperiled species. So yeah, I encourage you all when you're out there, to the extent that you're interested in it, is to be, looking around and taking note of what you see and sharing that through apps like iNaturalist. That could be very useful. With that, I think that's the end of my presentation. Certainly not the full breadth of what goes on in the Wildlife Commission, but hopefully through the Q&A again, we can get into some more depth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brooke. I just wanted to wrap things up real quick with some basic pointers on how a lot of this can kind of be pulled together moving forward. I think a key concept that we're kind of hoping that volunteers and hikers will get is that they can be aware of the different species and the different kinds of animals and plants that they're seeing, and learn more about what's invasive and how those different invasive plants in particular should or should not be dealt with. The app that Brooke mentioned, iNaturalist, can be a good one. You can take a picture, you can forward it, and that would just help a lot of the professional land managers throughout the state stay on top of what's happening in terms of different wildlife and plant life. Second thing is connect. One of the really great things about this panel is you have a lot of the partnerships and evidence that are going to become more important in the future, whether it be state officials, whether it be volunteers with the trails, and the fact that you're out there taking care of the trail already, how can you kind of become stewards of the plants and wildlife in those areas through your work? And, as always keeps showing up, it's really critical that people become involved in these efforts because, as Brooke mentioned, there's not enough of them to really take care of these sites. We're all going to have to get better, smarter, and better informed in terms of what's happening in our environments and what we need to be doing to help them stay intact and more balanced as a lot of these changes occur. So with that, do we have any questions for the panelists?
We have one that came in, and I think this may well be directed to Brooke. How do we know whether it's hunting season in a particular area or near the MST? And in other words, how do we know when we should be wearing orange?
Yeah, so we're working on improving communication to the public about what's going on all our game lands. I'm part of a committee that's hopefully we're going to make that information more accessible to users besides hunters. But right now the best source of information is our Regs Digest. It's an annual regulations digest. We call it the Regs Digest. I put the link to the digest in the chat, but it will outline this different seasons for different animals in different areas. So for example, the deer season in the central Piedmont is different than the deer season in the mountains. Turkey season's only in April, things like that. So all that information will be in the eRegs digest.
And then we got a question, how folks can keep up with the progress made toward the proposed Blues Lake and other lands. And specifically, is it regularly updated on the MST website?
That's a good question, and it's kind of a complicated one. So we're limited in a couple of different ways. One, we're limited by what the land manager is willing to share publicly. And at any time you're doing a trail planning effort, you need to be sort of tactful in how you do that. And so there's a specific way to engage with the public that is more preferable than someone finding out through someone linking them to a website that, oh, it looks like a trail is going to be potentially connecting through your property. How do you feel about that? And so there's some information as far as where we're routing trail within a property with a willing agency like Duke Energy that is easy to share. But then once we start to expand that planning effort to connect beyond those boundaries to be complete, it gets a little bit more challenging. And I've experienced that with our work in the coastal Crescent, where I almost have to have two sets of maps, one that we have as an internal document that we share with planners and, local government officials or land managers, and then one that we can share more broadly that shows maybe not the specific route we're hoping to take, but the general area we're looking to get through. And so some of the stuff from the Coastal Crescent is going to be worked on over the summer to be uploaded onto our website for each specific region and area. As far as Blues Lake is concerned, we don't have a plan for that now, and we may be a little bit limited by my time. But if you reach out to me specifically, that'd probably be the easiest way to get the information now. But we could definitely do a better job of updating on all the stuff we're juggling at any given time.
Any other questions?
Comment, I would just recommend, it's never wrong to wear Blaze Orange. We wore them pretty much all the time, started out wearing them for the road walks, kept them on for the game lands and the hunting seasons, and kept them on after that because it made it easier to see each other if one got ahead of the other. Our rule was if you turned around and didn't see orange, you stop and wait. And if you don't see them in a reasonable time, you go back.
And onto that.
Also, one more point is a lot of times people think you're some official and they want to mind the rules a little bit better. Of course, they also thought we were turtle checkers on the Outer Banks.
To add a little bit about it's always good to wear the orange is, at least in the mountains, the comment is always, whatever the official season is, the poaching season begins the day after.
That's what I would say. What if the hunter doesn't know whether it's a hunting day or not?
We've got a question from...
Good points, yeah. You never know. I've definitely been out there on Sundays and been hearing gunshots, and I'm like, whoa, okay, I thought this was a no hunting day here. So.
Yeah, and one thing we're hoping to do moving forward that we're starting work on at Falls Lake, and Jim and I are helping to push this forward, is to have more trail kiosks that are more formalized in the information that they contain. And I think a goal should be to have as much information regarding the hunting season available to people when they enter the trail in these areas, probably more so in the game lands than just about anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think that Steph Jeffries has reached out to, in the Piedmont at least, to our Piedmont, Northern Piedmont management biologist to help get some of those signs in place for like the Falls Lake section. I see a question in the chat that I'd be glad to answer about the Falls Lake segment about thinning and clear cutting. Should I go ahead and answer that, or do we?
Yeah, go for it.
Yep. Okay, so I'll read the question out loud just so everybody's on the same page. It says several areas along Falls Lake segment have been logged or thinned in recent years. Who develops a plan for replanting, and when does it happen? And are diversity of native species included? So there are some areas along Falls Lake, Jordan Lake, in other game lands where we do log and we keep it logged. So we try to maintain early successional habitat, which is an imperiled habitat type across the country. So we've lost a lot of early successional habitat, and that's really most of the imperiled bird species that occur in our country are actually species that are reliant on early successional habitat. So in some cases, those clear cuts will just be maintained as early successional habitat, so herbaceous. They'll be mowed or more likely burned on an annual or semi-annual basis to maintain that just herbaceous vegetation to provide that habitat. In other cases, they will be regrown for future timber harvests. Some of the lands along Falls Lake do provide some revenue source to support other habitat management activities on Falls Lake. And we have forestry management plans for Falls Lake that are developed by the Wildlife Resources Commission's foresters. So I'm not really sure which ones you're talking about in terms of like what the goal is of those particular clear cuts that you're seeing. It could be one of the either one. And another important management tool that we use thinning for is to actually just reduce the basal area of a stand, so we have a more open canopy. So when you see thinning happening, it's usually we're trying to maintain an open canopy, so we have a diverse understory growing up underneath the pines to sort of mimic that pine savanna ecosystem type that you commonly see with longleaf pines down in the sandhills. And that provides a greater diversity of forage for wildlife, as well as a greater diversity of insects for birds, things like that. So, so it depends on what you're looking at. And, but yeah, as far as replanting, I don't think we do a lot of replanting, but I am not a forester, so I'm not completely certain of that, but I can share those management plans with you all if you're interested, because I'm not sure if the forest management plan is on the website.
Thanks, Brooke. We also had a question about camping on game lands. Is that something that you all support?
Yeah, you are allowed to camp in designated camping areas on game lands. And not all game lands do have camping areas, but along the Mountains to Sea Trail, we have designated camping areas. And that information, I believe, is in the Regs Digest as well.
Yeah, I believe you just have to call ahead and get a special use permit, and maybe not. It depends on the game land, but I know that they do prioritize during hunting season those campgrounds being used by hunters. So if it is occupied by a hunter on the day you're hoping to camp there, then you'll be second in line. I did see a question up toward the beginning about a bridge, but before I respond to that, and I may ask you for some help, Trevor, there was a question about historic sites in addition to natural resources. And so those are obviously very important to us as well, and will always be a part of our sort of survey process. So when I was talking about Ballew's Lake and doing conservation planning and survey work as we look through these proposed routes, that is always a part of our process, or will be as we're doing more of this. But I think that is an area where we could use more partnership. We do not have a specific contact with the Department of Cultural Resources or anyone who's someone we can call upon regularly, but at the Ballew's Lake area, for example, there is a very large Native American archaeological site, the Sara Native American tribe there. So we're highly aware of not only that history, but colonial history as well. It's a really good question. And then, Trevor, what do you know about DEQ restrictions on building in the floodplain? I think that we've experienced mostly pushback when it comes to be a certain size.
Well, I think that one is, as a practical matter, you want to avoid it if possible anyways, because if you just have a little bit of elevation, you're keeping most of the water off where people would be walking. But at the same time, a lot of the land that we've got available for these kinds of trails is going to be floodplain, because it's also going to be a sewer right of way, or one of these things that makes it a little easier to acquire the land in a linear fashion, right? So I think that just in a practical on the ground site plan, you have to try and get up off of, you know, where you have a riparian area anyways. Just practically, you don't want people to stop at their mud. It's also very sensitive environmentally. It's bad for the streams. But there are technologies and techniques to do boardwalks and other things through actual wetlands. But that's where you have to follow not just DEQ's guidelines, but national guidelines as well. And
I would say that in our experience, we haven't, and I'm new, and so I haven't built any real substantial bridges yet, although we're hoping to do some large ones in Bladen Lake State Forest. And so I think that there's a bit of a gray area there, and it depends on the land manager. And so, you know, if it's something on public land, there's going to be a process that is, you know, very strictly adhered to by the land manager. That will usually include being very thorough about making sure that impact studies are done. But I can't speak to exactly what maybe private landowners have or haven't done. I'd be interested to learn more about different people's experiences there.
Yeah, the guidelines should be the same in terms of wetland impacts in particular, and the kinds of permits that you might need. But we have about 2 or 3 minutes. If anybody had one more thing to add, either the speakers or a quick question. All right, well, I just want to thank everybody, particularly our speakers, Ben Jones and Brooke Messa, for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us on Saturday, and everyone else. Thank you for your attention and your comments and your participation, and most of all for your volunteering. This trail is an incredible asset to the state, and it wouldn't be possible without each of you. So we're very grateful for everything that you're doing. And if you have other questions or things come up, please reach out to myself or one of the speakers. And we look forward to seeing you on the trails.